Welcome you all to the today program Preparedness to Peer Review and Documentation Required for Peer Review. I now request our guest C.S. Balasubramaniam sir to come to the occupy the desk. And I also request the members to stand for the ICAI anthem. Thank you.
य एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति य एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्मिमाणः निर्मिमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यति कश्चन एतद्द्वैता 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 एतद्द्वैता.
Thank you. Today we have ourselves distinguished speaker Balasubramaniam TV sir. He is a chartered accountant, certified fraud examiner, registered valuer, insolvency professional, empanel arbitrator. He is also a specialist in statutory audits, expert advisory for audit and accounting issues, valuations, due diligence and merger and acquisition advisory, business processes and strategy consulting, forensic analysis and investigation. He has been involved in valuation and due diligence support services engagement and handled supervised forensic engagement across 20 countries. He has also been a member of Auditing and Assurance Standards Board and member of Committee for Accounting Standards for local bodies. He is also a member of Advisory Board of ICAI RVO, has presented paper in seminars for professional accountants, and is also a faculty for ICAI's valuation course and forensic course. He is also involved in training of staff regularly. With this short summary, I welcome Balasubramaniam sir to today's program. Thank you, sir. On behalf of SIRC, we thank you, sir, for accepting the invitation for today's program. And I also request C.S. Balasubramaniam P for honoring the guest with the memento. So thank you. Thank you, sir. Without further delay, I like to.
Yeah. Good afternoon and good evening. Audible, no? Yeah. Is this visible? You want some lights to be switched off this side? In this side, panel lights are now. Maybe not. So today we are going to be looking at preparedness for peer review and documentation. I have also shared this whole presentation to the office, and I think anybody, I think it will be put on the website. It can be downloaded. So I'm going to go through some of the key things in this. There are some lists also which are available in this, which can be useful, etc. But that can always be downloaded and used. So let me take you through the basics and what are the key things which we need to be prepared for. Because this is becoming more and more important. Yeah, I think now it is probably better. So the first thing is audit documentation right now is gaining significant amount of importance. In fact, so much so if you don't do audit also, it's okay so long as you document. That's the way one can look at it. Right, there is a significant amount of emphasis which is being placed on documentation. There are reasons for it also. Now sometimes we don't appreciate or understand if you really look at all the matters which have gone in before any forum, right, any judicial forum or any disciplinary action, it is after many years, 4 years, 5 years, etc. Now there is no way even we can remember what was done, right? So how do you prove what you had done? How do they evaluate what was done? And how does a third party, an independent third party, satisfy themselves that something was done, right, or something wrong was not done? So all that comes from the requirement for documentation. In fact, there is this requirement that you have to lock your files within 60 days. When you say lock your files, if it is a physical file, what do? You have to ensure that after 60 days nobody can put papers into it. So in historical days when this was there used to be separate section where you have to hand over the files. Once the audit is over and you have handed over the files, you cannot take it back. It requires the highest level of approval to touch that file, and those people who are custodians of that file will act like they are super librarians. Today in software world it has become much more easier. Many of the audit software have locks in them that once you close it, you can't, even the managing partner cannot touch it. Matter ends there. And assuming somebody does any touching also, in digital world you know that everything gets recorded somewhere. So there are digital forensics which can highlight that these have been tampered with. So it's becoming very, very significant to keep it. Basically what they are saying is whatever you did, it should be simultaneously documented. It's a huge step for everybody. In fact, we have also had a huge learning process to move to software which we use currently for audit, right? But once you start doing it, you find that there are easier ways of documenting. At the same time, you are ensuring your basic coverage and things like that also. So frankly, what we now hear from many of the international counterparts who come to see, in India you are doing over audit. If you document and also do the kind of work we do, many a time, in fact recently I did a QRB, I can't mention the name and all that. He has literally verified sales for a huge percentage. Normally in an audit you will take a sample, and if your controls and systems you are satisfied, you will probably take a sample of 25 or 40 samples in a year. Here was a case where he had nearly verified 60 to 70% of the sales. Now in today's world that is really not required, and that's not adding value. It takes a lot of time. It does not add value. But what was happening, he has done all this, but basics he has not even documented. So audit fails at some level because it's not documented. So very, very important is in the context of what is expected today. Today there is a huge amount of expectation change, right? All this about auditor is not a bloodhound, watchdog, all that is gone, right? It might be there as a defense, we can try and still talk about it, but that's not the expectation. Today the expectation is you have to know, right? You have to be able to very clearly come out with this thing. In fact, I seriously think that it might even just go beyond all this and go into the next thing, that they might say that audits might have to have some amount of not just skepticism, it has to be something more. Already there are some projects people are talking about what beyond skepticism. Skepticism is not enough for audit now. That's what is one of the thoughts which are going on. But anyway, coming back to the minimum things about peer review, at least to be able to meet what is expected today, right? One, standards and regulations have increased. I think when I did articles and all, there were a few accounting standards, and as far as I remember, I don't know whether there were any auditing standards. There were some AAS, some few were there, right? Auditing and assurance standards, old standards, which were very few. Today you have so many accounting standards and 2 sets of accounting standards not mentioned, and then you have a host of audit standards, then you have the code of ethics, which itself is a big book. All this is minimum, and then you have Companies Act, then you have, if it depending on the industry, you may have to consider NBFC regulations, RBI regulations, all this, so many things are coming. Now, how do you ensure that you have complied with many of these things? It can't be from memory, all that is gone now. It has to be necessarily by ensuring we document so that people can do. This is on one side. On the other side, most of our team members don't continue for long. Articles now has become from 3 to 2 years. Now, before you can turn, they are gone. This is a new set of people. And even assuming you have employees, those employees also have one of the highest attrition would be in profession, right? For probably well known reasons, but that is a fact we have to live with. So, there is so much of attrition happening on one side, and there is a huge requirement on the other side. How do we marry these? So, if I have standard checklists, if I have standard documentation, that is how we can ensure that the minimum standards are being met and basics are not being missed out. So, we have to move a long way from what was to the expectations. So, if you look at peer review, what are all that they are looking at? The peer review procedures covers compliance procedures, how you run the compliances, right, and substantive procedures, which looks at your compliance with technical, professional and ethical standards. So, they take, in fact, the questionnaire which is there for any of these reviews is so huge. Forget about your audit. The peer reviewer who comes and fills up has to fill up so much. You might not have done so much of paperwork for your audit itself. So, that is what is happening today. Compliance with technical, professional and ethical standards is one side, it is being tested. Then your compliance test of design, implementation of control and operating effectiveness. So, what they are looking at here is, okay, do you have a system? And if you have a system, by looking at some sample, like you are doing audit, they are doing an audit on you by taking some samples, whether you have complied with it. So, very interesting question. Somebody, in fact, when they came for a peer review, the first thing they asked is, okay, if the standards, ethical standard says you have to look at the client and evaluate the client, and if he is not a good client, you should not accept. So, all of us will say, yes, we do that. We never accept somebody. Okay, how many clients did you reject last year? How many clients did you reject in the last 5 years? No records anywhere, right? So, it is not enough to have something in the mind, but there has to be something which gets recorded. Now, in a larger firm, this becomes easier comparatively in certain ways. There are other complexities which will be there, but in a one person practice or a 2-partner practice, you know, so you do not document some of these things, but that is not enough. Somewhere you should, and in today's context with so much of email, everything being available, there are ways of doing it. So, for example, in our office we send out a mail whenever we are accepting some large new client or whenever we are rejecting a client, we put a mail to our partners. 2 things happen. One is it gets documented, more importantly it communicates, right? We all know that we are doing something. So, if there are any dealings with that party, etc., all that will also get addressed. And in that process, in the rare case of rejection also, you are communicating. You are not taking it for ABC reason, whatever it is, purely internal. So, we were able to say, no, we may not have a register, we may not have a system and all that, but from our mail, yes, we can search and take and give you some sample that it is there. So, there is a process which can be tested also. So, if you look at in that, the first core thing they look at is your ethical structures and this thing, how you are. This is one of the major areas where documentation may be lacking, especially because we are so used to it. I am personally handling it. When I am personally handling it, what am I doing by documenting? These are the things we normally look at. So that would be an area of concern which can come. So in the ethical this thing, what are all the various things? First, let's start from independence, right? Now, in a one partner firm, two partner firm, or sorry, proprietorship, one two partner firm, etc., it might be easier. You just have to, do you know this client, do you have anything? Very simple to do it. We have 26 partners. Now, if I get one audit in Ashok Leyland Group, how do I ensure that nobody owns a Ashok Leyland share, right? So you have to put in processes. You have to put in processes depending on the level. The institute has not said, or the peer reviewer is not going to expect the same kind of process everywhere. We have an annual declaration, we have an annual list of all listed companies which are remotely even connected, so we should not hold shares, etc. But that need not be the case in every company. Nobody expects that. But you must have some process of doing it. So how do you, then the next interesting thing, independence for the partner is at one level, then independence for the team members. Team members, relatives should not be in a key position there. Many a times our clients refer their children for articles to us. It's a way of life, right? So when some clients children are articled with us, how do we ensure they don't go to that client? They can go to some other client, but they don't go to that client. How are we ensuring these? And those get documented, right? So one of the simple thing you can have is, in every audit file, you know who are the people who are going to work on that audit file. You have a standard declaration, all of them sign at the beginning and at the end. I don't hold shares, I don't have relatives working here in key positions, I don't have A, B, C, D, E, F, right, like that. So these are things which can be there. Second is confidentiality. Now, it is under the code of ethics, it is an automatic expectation that the moment you are appointed as an auditor, you have to maintain confidentiality, right? That is done. But then we employ chartered accountants, we employ non-chartered accountants, and we employ articles. For chartered accountants, you can take a view because they are covered by the Chartered Accountants Act, automatically the confidentiality is there, whether they give it in writing or not. You can take that view, right? But what about other employees? We take semi-qualifieds, we take graduates today, we take MBAs, anything we take, because we don't get people. We take everybody, right? How do we ensure that their confidentiality is ensured and taken? And today, mind you, clients are asking if there are maybe, you know, even if we are not doing listed companies ourselves, we might be doing subsidiaries of listed company, we might be doing associates of listed company. So somebody somewhere will ask this question. We have got queries on some companies after 4 or 5 years from SEBI. Who were the people who were involved in this audit? Give me their name, PAN number, etc. Why? They want to look at whether there were any transactions done in that date, or they had suspected some transactions happened, whether any of our people were involved. Right? The query comes after 5 years. So we have to always be prepared for, we know from income tax, that is the simplest thing we have all been handling. All queries come only after 4 or 5 years, nothing in the next year, nothing immediately, right? So surely unless we have some documentation, we can't pick out these things. Confidentiality is another key area. We need to have mechanisms where we can show that actually we are taking that confidentiality undertakings from the individuals who are involved in the audit. Also, professional behavior, I don't have to go into it. Then professional competence and due care. Now, most of the business are simple, but at the same time, sometimes we might get some complicated thing. We may be getting audit of a e-commerce business or platform company. Now, so many startups are there, some fancy companies will come. So, do we have the understanding and knowledge? In fact, I remember a few weeks back, somebody called saying that you know, we have got an audit of a company which has timeshare. We have never seen timeshare. Who can give us some guidance? Now when you get something like that, you need to ensure you have the professional competence to be able to manage it, or at least go and take some guidance so that you become competent. See, many of these in accounting is not rocket science, so you can get that. So how do you handle that? How do you take external support also where required, if required, and how do you ensure that you take what you are good at? Integrity, again these are standard things, integrity, objectivity, all that I will again not go into. So essentially, by having some documentation from the team, by having standard documentation, let me put it that way, you can ensure that you are able to showcase that your whatever you are practicing is also documented and it's available for being verified. Yeah, please.
What is the documentation for professional competence?
So you have actually, there are checklists which are there where you write saying that first of all, see, one of the things you are supposed to do under this essay is to understand the business, right? So when you do the understanding of the business, one of the things you also then put in your client acceptance documentation is, okay, having understood the business of the company, do I have the right competence within the firm to handle that audit, and who is that? So for example, I might say, oh, this is a very complex thing, I will put A, B, C in the team because A has that expertise, whereas D and E may not have that expertise. So I also identify how I am going to address that in writing. So it's part of the planning actually to see whether this is actually partly acceptance, pre-acceptance, right? So I ensure that I have A who is competent to do it, so I can take it. And then when I do the planning, I also ensure, earlier I had decided I am taking it only because A is there. In my planning, I cannot say I am going to allocate D, E and F to do the audit. Mismatch, right? So this is the continuity which will come. So essentially it is a checklist which you can have, a standard checklist which you can have, which addresses all this. That is basically, what are you saying? There are some 20 points, 15 points, whatever needs to be addressed. So by writing the answer against those 15 questions, you are ensuring you have not missed out something. A, B, you have documented in the process, right? So this is how it helps in having some standard checklist. There are a lot of material already available, which also I will give you a list at the end, from which you can take ready materials which are available either from the institute or from various chartered accountants and all that. It's there. So nothing needs to be reinvented, we need to only implement it and put it into use. So in the review procedure, they will look at how you are handling independence procedure. Then whenever you are taking outside consultation, I was just giving you an example, somebody asked about timeshare accounting, only that portion they need advice, they don't need advice about the rest of it. So whom did they approach, how did they get it, what kind of expert they went to and took. You can do it, there is nothing which prohibits you, because everybody need not know everything. For instance, I don't even know how to fill up my income tax form, I don't even know which form is filed for me. So that's the status I am given, I digitally sign when they put it, that's it. So everybody need not know everything, but the point is you should take, you can take that limited consultation in the area you need and document it. You have covered that, you have taken the right this thing. Maintenance of professional skills and standards is upgrading yourself. There are changes which are coming every year. So one of the questions which people could be looking at is, okay, over the last 2 years there have been so many changes in the standards, who has attended what in, training sessions for it. It could be internal training also, but something, how do you know that they have knowledge about it? So for instance, I went to a small firm, totally only 5 people in that firm, only 5 people in that firm. They have a habit, every week, I forgot which day, some day every week, In the morning 1 hour is for updates. They just speak between themselves on all changes which have come. So, they are only 5 people in the same location. So, it is the simplest thing. There is no need to make a newsletter, there is no need to circulate over mail, nothing. It is done. And peer review is not expecting that these things should be only in a written format. If you have a process which clearly is happening regularly, even this is good. And with a small setup like that, this is the easier way, very quick. Staff supervision is the other area, that how you are ensuring that various levels of staff are supervised. Many a times they will directly report to the partner, which is well and good. So, but are they doing it, or some work papers are closed without any review. So, that is very important, that who is prepared and then how it is getting reviewed. Then office administration, there are various other things related to the quality, which comes from your general this thing. For example, do you have a mechanism to ensure who is going to be on leave, etc. So, you can plan, right. Do you have a mechanism to ensure that if you get some grievance letter from or any complaint from some client, it comes to the right person, it gets addressed. So, office administration also, there are certain things which are specifically looked at, because it is a total quality system. That is what they are looking for, not just the work paper in that particular audit. Okay, this audit I couldn't find anything wrong is not enough. Do you have a quality system, something like the ISO 9001? Do you have a quality system? So, in independence, does the practice unit have a policy to ensure independence objectively? So, this is what I was talking about. You have to have a policy first, right. You need to know what is that you should ask. So, if I have developed a checklist, automatically I am putting all that there, and those developed checklists are readily available. We can just copy and maybe make some modifications for our specific requirement and use them. Does the practice unit communicate these policies? For example, by making them look at this independence declaration and signing before they take up an audit, automatically you have communicated. Otherwise, you might have a policy that I am an article and my father is working in a company, I should not go, but how do I know? I am coming only for 2 years, I might just go there, right. So, that is something which has to be. Then how do you monitor compliance? So, the end level I will give you an example. See, in some larger company audits, what will happen is, and you know, articles are somebody who can leave in between also. So, we have a habit, we take an independence declaration when they join the firm every year, and when they take up a specific audit, we take again an independence for that audit at the beginning, at the end, right. So, now sometimes when somebody comes in between for 2 days for PV, it gets missed out, because they are not in the beginning. When we start planning the audit, they are not there. When you complete, they are not there, but they have gone for PV in between, it gets missed out. So, what saved us, and this was a query which was asked, you have sent people who are not covered, they have not said they are independent. How do you know they are independent? You do not have a process to ensure everybody is independent. So, we said no, every year at the beginning we say that if at all you are allocated to any audit where you have a relative, you have to tell, and that is collected every year and at the beginning of their joining. So, if he is a new joinee to the company, on the date he has joined, he has given. So, he knows he is supposed to tell me if he has any this thing. So, it is going to that level, especially when the NFRA and all comes, they are quoting para 3.432. This is the wordings used there, that is how they are writing. So, it is becoming very this thing. So, at least at a broad level we should necessarily have, and the simpler formats are readily available. So, that is something which can be used. Then does the practice unit periodically review the association with clients? Now I talked about client acceptance to do a evaluation. Now the standard requires not only at the time of acceptance, every year when you are taking up the renewal, every year, not 5 years, every year when you are taking up the renewal of audit from your end, you have to still do it. You have to again re-evaluate that from last year to now you don't have something negative for which you want to rethink about taking up the audit or not. It should be further checked if the financial statements are prepared by the PU or those charged with governance, right. So now India is the only country or maybe only large country which has specific restrictions saying that in no audit we can prepare the accounts. Account maintenance and audit have to be done by two separate parties, at least legally that is the requirement, right. Internationally, if you see under IFAC regulations, IFAC says this kind of segregation is required only for public interest entities, what we would call as listed companies or very large companies with lot of public interest in it. There you cannot do it. For smaller companies, it's a standard practice. The auditors maintains the accounts and does the audit. That's what happens in the international scenario, and that's permitted under IFAC. But in India, it's not. So one of the key things they look at it also, who prepares. So we should at least ensure that in documentation we are very clear. You can't have a client asking, when will you complete preparing my TB? And that cannot be in your work paper, right. So those are things we should take care. Professional skills, when you look at it, like I said, what kind of people you need, right, and then accordingly theoretically you should establish a recruitment policy. நம்ம ஆளே கிடைக்க மாட்டேன்றான், அந்த வாசல்ல அந்த எடுத்து போடுற லெவல்ல இருக்கு. So that's, but the training at least we should ensure we are getting there, right. Continuing education program, most important thing, because there are so many changes which is keeping on happening. In fact, today one of the prime reasons why many youngsters don't want to come into practice side is it's much easier if they go into the corporate world, etc. Better pay, better atmosphere, right, and less complications like this. You don't have, you have changes coming in every act, every month. So you have to keep on reading, so which is not there. So these are some key things we should look at in terms of this thing. Like I said, outside consultation is permitted, you can use it. Staff supervision, right. Now in a smaller entity, the supervision is by automatic looking at, but is there a clear process that if there are 10 areas he is doing work and all those 10 areas it has been supervised by somebody and signed off, okay, what you have done is okay. என்ன பண்றோம் நம்ம, normally we send them saying, okay, you go revenue பார்க்க போறியா, சரி இந்த பேசிஸ்ல ஒரு 20 samples select பண்ணு, போய் do these 5 checks on each of the sample you have selected, write it down, come பண்ணிட்டு ஓகே எல்லாம் ஓவர்னா அவ்வளோதான், அவனும் ஓவர்னு சொல்லிட்டு போய்டுவான். நம்ம அதை பார்த்துட்டு we have to put our closing this thing in the same document saying, okay, he has actually seen it because we told him to do something. Whether he has actually done, we have to supervise. That is something which needs to get documented. Again, by using some standard formats, these can be put into place. I remember when I joined for articles, my boss Ramki, we used to call him, we used to have a fun in the office. We used to always say Ramki and Kadiyum onnu. Both of them like a lot of paper. In those days there were no computers, no, everything was manual. So you have to write so much. That was the way it was working. In 1980s, when I joined for articles, he had printed checklist in the office which will say prepared by, reviewed by, date, area, client name, எல்லாம் மேலே print பண்ணி இருக்கும். அந்த பேப்பரில் தான் எழுதணும். We cannot write in any paper. So if that was possible in 1980s by a small firm, At that time it was a very small firm, it was a one room office. Our office was a one room office. Probably that is what helped us grow. Ramki's that one act would have been a big contributor to our growth, because that builds that this thing. So it is possible, and inniki vandu enna ellame computerized. You don't even have to print this thing. You can get it designed in computer. It has become much cheaper to do all this. But that is something which can be done, and all standardized forms checklists. Over 30-40 checklists if you create and keep in every file, you would have addressed bulk of the issues. All that is readily also available in the net today. Then for office administration, the key areas, one as I said is record retention, right, including security aspect. That is, if it is physical files, how you are ensuring nobody else touches it, because it says after 60 days you are not supposed to add anything. And normally if they find something done there, they will then downgrade it completely to the last grade. For example, we get reviewed, we have got I think 6 times peer reviewed, 3 times QRB reviewed, and maybe about 6 times reviewed by PKF International. So many reviews we have gone through, and in the review, if they find one document by mistake date and something has shown that it was filed after 60 days, you will come from grade A to grade D, the lowest grade. One document, there is no materiality, nothing here. That means you don't have a control to ensure that your documents are closed. So very simple. So that is something which has to be done. In fact, I think in one of the NFRA cases also this was highlighted, that there were post date changes which were there, or documentation which were brought in, which was very seriously viewed. So we have to ensure that we have a clear this thing for that. The second is of course the client related thing, right. This is where the acceptance also you can ensure you are documenting and keeping. Staff register is more to ensure your this thing in a smaller entity, you can always proper library. Schedule 3 guidance note on schedule 3 illana nama avadukku audit pannittirukona, who will refer to that, or where will they refer? Today of course everything is available in electronic form. We should at least have it in electronic form available. So that is something, in fact we have done that. Whatever is available in electronic form, we keep it in one place so people can refer to that also. So it should be a process we do, whether it is physical books or this thing, what is minimum required for the regular audits, whether all those are available. Then compliance procedure, why are they performing? To assess general controls and decide nature and extent of the substantive tests which needs to be done. So checklist for ethical standards, you can develop various things. I will not go into it, I will skip this. Then let us come to the engagement performance, right. So in engagement performance, let us see what all the things. Now we are coming, first what we were talking about is the overarching thing at the entity level as the practice unit, what we need to have in terms of ethical the standards, and also adherence to guidelines on a broader this thing. So coming to individual audit, right, individual audit. So engagement performance. So each engagement, how are we performing? So what is the audit plan? Again, an audit is done with nearly 50 to 60% of the time spent on planning. Execution coming. First starting lo sonna mari, you should document then do. That is the key, right. So planning is where the maximum time is spent actually. Vice versa. அந்த ஆடிட் ஆரம்பிக்கணுமா, நாளைக்கு முதல்ல 2 பேர் அனுப்பிச்சிடு, அப்புறம் பேசிக்கலாம், அவ்வளோதான். அவன் ஒரு 10 நாள் 15 நாள் he would have spent there. Then only we will call them and talk to them as to what is happening there. So that is not how the new audit methodologies are, and that's not how the standards of auditing is also expecting. So the same principle is what has come into RBIA also, internal audit, where we say risk based internal audit. Everything today, their focus is first plan, understand the business, understand the client. ஒரு simple example சொல்றேன் சார். Our client is into sales, right? How you audit revenue will vary depending on whether he is selling through distributors, whether he is selling directly through his own shops somewhere, whether he is selling only through modern retail, that is he is selling through supermarkets only, whether he is selling online. Our audit procedures itself will vary. So if we don't give the right instructions upfront, because somebody would have done some other audit earlier, he will go and do something here. It will have no relevance. Same, if 90% of the revenue is coming from exports, what you need to see in the audit is also different. Bill of lading irukka, bill of lading vandu 31 தேதிக்கு முன்னாடி இருக்கா இல்லையா. So there is a completely different thing which needs to be seen compared to the other. So first thing they say is spend maximum time in planning. So what do you do in planning? You do assignment of responsibility, then understand the background information on the client, previous year what you learnt, everything, all that, and then the plan should also contain what is the staffing requirement, risks and time allocation. Enna pandrom first edella risk, revenue risk we know, management override is basically those who can have control over the company can make fraudulent transactions or errors, big errors, right? Bias could be there. So that is something which is taken. Adu thavara vera enna major risk avangalukku and the company ku. In some companies probably it could be employee cost, because there is a huge amount of employees. In some other companies there may not be any employees. Like if you take something like Infosys, their employee cost will be the biggest. You can't ignore that. Maybe if it is a trading company, their employee cost would be smallest. Maybe you can ignore it also. So which are the critical risks, and then accordingly you plan the whole thing. Then you create checklists for various things, what you need to verify, and important points from previous year audit experience, industry specific points, which is what I was also explaining, that depending on how your business works, whether you are selling through e-commerce, whether you are selling through retailers, whether you are selling directly, it makes a lot of difference. Then in pre-assignment you do meetings. First of all you understand with the client, போன வருஷத்துல இந்த வருஷம் ஏதாவது சேஞ்சஸ்லாம் இருக்கா, பிஸ்னஸ் ஏதாவது மாறி இருக்கா, பிஸ்னஸ் ஆப்ரேஷன்ஸ் ஏதாவது மாறி இருக்கா, புதுசாக ஏதாவது பண்ண ஆரம்பிச்சிருக்கீங்களா, ப்ராடக்ட்ஸ் ஏதாவது புதுசாக வந்திருக்கா. ஸோ டூ ஐ ஹேவ் டு சேஞ்ச் மை ஆடிட் ஃபார் தட், ஃபஸ்ட்டு அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்ட் பண்ணிக்கிறோம் அதை. சரி, அது தவிர யாராவது கீ பீப்புள் விட்டு போயிருக்காங்களா, இப்போ அந்த பொசிஷனே ஆள் இல்லாமல் இருக்கலாம், மாறி இருக்கலாம். ஸோ ஆல் தட் வி அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்ட். அது கிளையண்ட்டோட மீட்டிங். அதே மாதிரி வி ஆல்சோ ஹாவ் அ மீட்டிங் வித் அவர் டீம் சேயிங் யார் என்ன பண்ணணும், போன வாட்டி என்ன பண்ணினோம், ஏன் பண்ணினோம், இந்த வாட்டி என்ன சேஞ்சஸ், வாட் யூ ஹாவ் டு லுக் அட், ரைட். ஸோ லாஸ்ட் டைம்ஸ் ஆடிட் சம்மரி என்ன வந்தது, ஹைலைட்ஸு என்ன ரிஸ்க்ஸ் வேர் அப்சார்வ், தென் அகெயின் யூஸ் ஆஃப் ஸ்டாண்டர்டைஸ்ட் ஃபார்ம்ஸ். எல்லாத்துக்கும் இஃப் யூ யூஸ் சம் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் செக்லிஸ்ட் வி ஆர் வெல் protected. Then during the audit process, now the team has gone to do the audit planning appuram, you need to keep progress that you need to monitor, right. And then any key observations which are coming from the team, how it is reviewed and taken up with the client and finalized. And also review of other team members work, very important. Many times this may get missed out, again by using standard checklists. If we can have standard checklist put, then that covers most of the things. Idellanda vandu if you see and the ROMM document, ICF and IFC documentation which the institute has shared, in book as well as in Excel form and all that by a CD. It has many things readily available, so we can use some of that for detailed works also. Then documentation security. Idu vandu of course most of it, let's assume we will keep it in two ways. One vandu innik because we are all electronic, it will be in some computer. So in the computer, how do you ensure that it is kept protected and not accessible for everybody? So the simplest thing we can do, ரொம்ப complicated IT solutionலாம் வேணாம், simplest thing we can do is audit முடிஞ்சதும் சென்ட்ரலாக ஆஃபீஸில் பார்ட்னரோட மெஷின்லேயோ இல்லை ஆஃபீஸில் இருக்கிற ஒரு மெஷின்லேயோ ஒரு ஃபோல்டர், அந்த ஃபோல்டருக்கு கீழே இந்த இயர் இந்த கிளைண்ட்னு போட்டுறணும். எல்லாரோட மெஷின்லேருந்து எடுத்துட்டா nobody can access that unless they come specifically where there. So this is the simplest method of doing a control on it and not have data lying everywhere. இல்லை ரெண்டு ரிஸ்க் இருக்குது. ஒன்று ஏதாவது மாற்றலாம் which is not permitted. ரெண்டாவது confidentiality. Your data is available everywhere. ரொம்ப காம்ப்ளிகேட்டட் சிஸ்டம்க்கெலாம் போக வேணாம், இதுவே சிம்பிள் திங் we can do also will work. Then once the audit is done, everything is done, process of forming opinion. Here also there is some documentation expected. இப்போ என்ன ஆச்சு, நம்ம பிளான் பண்ணபடி ஆடிட் பண்ணினோம், அதெல்லாம் டாக்குமெண்ட் பண்ணோம், அதுலேருந்து வந்த இஷ்யூஸ் எல்லாம் ரைஸ் பண்ணியிருக்கோம். அந்த இஷ்யூஸை எப்படி க்ளோஸ் பண்ணோம், க்ளோஸ் பண்ண முடியாதது தான் ரிப்போர்ட்டில் வரப்போகிறது, ஆர் க்ளோஸ் பண்ணிட்டோம் அதனால ரிப்போர்ட்லாம் க்ளீனாக இருக்குன்னு we should have that link of document. அதுலேயே அந்த outside consultations if any were taken. And again there could be some complex matters which can come where we might need opinion, like for example 185 186 ஏதாவது ஒப்பீனியன் வேணும், காரோவில் ரிப்போர்ட் பண்ணுறதுக்கு ஒப்பீனியன் வரலாம். ஆல் தட் குட் கம் ஹியர். தென் இஃப் தெர் ஆர் டிஃபரன்சஸ் இன் ப்ரொஃபஷனல் ஜட்ஜ்மெண்ட், உங்கள் ரெண்டு டீம் மெம்பர்ஸே வந்து டிஃப்ரெண்ட் வியூஸ் கொடுக்குறாங்கன்னா who will finalize on that? That should also get documented. இது பெரிய இடத்துலலாம் வரச்சா என்ன ஆகும், there could be even two partners having different views. So how do you finalize it is also something you should document. It's not wrong, we can always have different views. It's quite possible that it will come. But when that happens, how do you deal with it is the most important thing, and how do you document it? So the next step is audit documentation. See, I was talking about this thing. Now practical examples are there. Even in our firm we could have different views sometimes. So when we have two partners have different views, we give it to a committee of three other partners who are not involved in this. Three na chuma or number solren, some partners who are not involved in this, they will take a final view, who are not involved in the audit. They will take the final view on what should be the treatment, and then that we will publish within the partners as the firm's view. அப்போ ரெண்டு பார்ட்னர் ரெண்டு different thing, we don't give it out to this thing. In larger firms this is a complication. In smaller firms it's not, because it's easier. Ultimately if you are a proprietor, mostly you are taking the final call, judgment is yours, right? If it is a 2-member 3-member partnership also, it's easier to discuss and come to some consensus. But this is something which will be required. Then the third part is audit documentation, right? So in the audit documentation la we were talking about planning. So plan பண்றச்சே risk என்னன்னு ஐடென்டிஃபை பண்ணி இந்த ரிஸ்க்குக்கு நான் என்ன ப்ரொசீஜர்ஸ் ஆடிட் ப்ரொசீஜர்ஸ் பண்ண போகிறேன்றதை I should document. For example, if it is revenue வெரிஃபை பண்ணுறதுக்கு என்னெல்லாம் செக் நான் பண்ண போகிறேன். Currently I don't, I mean currently சொல்ல மாட்டேன், ஒரு 10 வருஷம் முன்னாடி பார்த்தா we won't be doing all this. But today the whole approach is risk based. So you have a risk, to address that risk what checks you are going to do. இங்கே தான் வந்து, that is why I said planning you have to spend a lot of time, because this is where your input is going to be important. The article might not know the criticality of how you audit or what you should verify if it is an export or domestic sale. That's where you are saying, okay boss, in the company la vandu export oriented, so in the rendu moonu additional points specific ah paakano. So we write the procedures what we are to check. Then when they go for execution, they are only writing what they found against that execution, the procedure against enna they find. So this is very important, and idhula you have to also on the planning timely you should also determine when you are going to do. For example, PV பண்றதுனா 31st March பண்ணனும் ideally. If you are not doing, there should be a way for balancing that. So PV in போடுறச்சே should also be identified, it will be done on 31st March. Maybe some fixed assets verification will be done in December itself for convenience. The மாதிரி you might do that. So the timing also, right? And then என்ன sample sales பார்க்க போறோம்னா, okay, what sampling we are going to do, how we are going to do that sampling, that also is determined. So the work paper says this is the risk, this is the procedure I am going to, these are the 5 procedures I am going to do against that, and when am I going to do it, and what is the sample I am going to see, who is going to do it also. Then you are allocating to them. So coming from all this, essentially there are 2 areas. One is risks related to the areas of operations. The second is estimates and where judgment is involved in calculation, like gratuity computation, right, or inventory provisioning, right. There could be areas where there will be, or warranty provision which you have to make, idella estimates are involved. Again an area where there could be management bias. இந்த வருஷம் எல்லாம் நல்லா இருக்கா, ஓகே கிராச்சுவிட்டியில் 5% பதிலாக 7% போடு salary increase, higher provision I will make. So these are things we have to be careful about, right? So what the standard expects is every critical estimate which the company has, you should have at least 2-page documentation on it. What you have verified, how you have verified, what is your, how you are satisfied yourself that they have estimated properly. Minimum 2 pages, that's the expectation, thumb rule we can keep. All estimates and judgments where the company is using. So in the audit documentation, if you look at it as 4 stages: pre-audit, planning, execution and conclusion. Pre-audit is about appointment letter, writing to the previous auditors, right? We should have an engagement letter done. Engagement letter is something we have to draft and give to the client, saying this is our understanding and these are your responsibilities and these are my responsibilities, ellam போட்டு கொடுக்கணும். அதுக்கும் standard formats are available, so we can do with that. In correspondence with the previous auditors, we know that is something which we need to do, and this is where the client acceptance process also comes. So like I said, every year we need to do it. So client or risk reputation we should check, right? Reason, if the auditor was changed, you should also document why the auditor was changed and I was given. Just because he has come from the other person to you, happy, one side happy, yes, other side is you have to also worry why he is changed, right? You have to understand that there could be genuine reasons also. Sometimes there could be risks which are behind that. Then if there are any conflict of interest, so this is where you are documenting, okay, I have checked with my partners, nobody owns shares in this group, right? I have checked with my partners, they are not doing any business dealing with this group, they don't have loans within this group. In a partners relatives, right? Of course at least limits are there. So there is this issue which needs to be considered. Then any other factors, public news la irundhathu, like for example இன்னைக்கு IAFL audit கூப்பிட்டு கொடுத்தா கூட எவ்வளோ பேர் எடுத்துப்பாங்கன்னு தெரியாது, frankly, right? So like that you may want to avoid it for some reasons. So that is also part of this thing. That is all done prior to the audit commencement. Then planning, like I said, planning is the biggest chunk. 60% time you spend on planning, because here you have decided everything. What you are going to do also you will decide. So understanding the entity, so what they are doing, and how they are accounting and what controls they have. So, what is the audit risk there and what we are going to verify, all that is done here. The plan includes the risk as well as the assessment procedures. Everything gets documented at this point. So, once you do this, then this becomes the blueprint for the team which goes there. They only take this and say, okay, the 5 item I have been asked to do, that is what I will do and finish. Unless they find something, they come back and you add something, that is a possibility always, but this is how it normally works at that stage. So, everything is documented at that time. So, when it comes to the stage 3 execution, what is it that you will have? என்ன sample எடுத்தோம் எங்கயாவது document பண்ணிருக்கணும், எவ்வளோ sample, என்ன sample பண்ணோம், what are the checks we did, what was the finding we got from that. Then there could be confirmation letters. Obviously confirmation letters, we need copies, either physical or digital copy, we will need copies. So, on the confirmation letters, right, and then there could be documentation about going concern, especially if the company is making losses, etc. So, again typically one of the expectation is you should have a checklist for going concern determination, because that is a mandatory requirement. Even in a profit making company, you should at least document saying, yes, for these 5 factors this company has no going concern problem, so no further examination is required, right. Adhe mari estimates, these are things which will get documented during the execution stage. Then conclusion. In the work paper panninadilla, what you would have found? You would have found what is known as a misstatement, that is error, accounting error. இப்போ நம்ம வந்து 20 வவுச்சர் தான் சாம்பிள் பார்த்துருக்கோம், அதில் we found this error. அப்போ total populationல what could be the error? Would it be material? So, this is what you need to look at. அதனால தான் all the errors are listed, documented. நம்ம கண்டுபிடிச்ச எரரை கரெக்ட் பண்ணால் போகாது, அதோட இம்பேக்ட் பார்க்கணும் எப்போவுமே. Will it have a larger impact? So, you look at that and then document that. That is the very important thing, right? How you have dealt with each of the errors you have found, and then based on that you come to the final conclusion on the report. இப்போ இது வந்து இந்த main report, this is a simple thing. Then in India we have this many other things we have to report about. Main report liye வந்து other regulatory requirements னு ஒரு 10 கேள்வி இருக்கு, அப்புறம் ஒரு காரோ இருக்கலாம், அப்புறம் ஒரு IFC, all that. So, for those also you should have checklists. How are we saying that caro clause about PF has been complied with? அப்போ அதுக்கு we should have a documentation and conclusion. அந்த டாக்குமெண்ட்ஸும் எக்ஸிக்யூஷன்லேருந்து வரும், you will have to update based on that here. So, that is how you should keep it. And the same set of documentation, like I said, all this gets questioned after many years. So, it helps in many ways. First of all, it assists external inspection, which will happen many years again later. Assist internal quality review also. Evidence of audit planning. So, முதல்ல பிளான் பண்ணதை வச்சுருந்தா அவன் பண்ணியிருக்கான்றதுக்கே உங்களுக்கு ப்ரூஃபாக இருக்கும். பிகாஸ் நம்மளே வந்து when it comes, all the audits will come at the same time, we will be under pressure. So, if you have already given him a checklist of these 6 things to do, அவன் வரைச்சா அது பண்ணிட்டானான்னு பார்த்தா போகிறோம். திருப்பி again we don't have to reapply our mind when we are under pressure for 10 clients at the same time. Evidence for basis of conclusion. So, how we have finally concluded is not only in our mind, it is there in document. It will help the engagement team itself. They know what is to be done at various levels. At execution level, at the lowest level, when they are carrying out some this thing, yes, these are the things which have been asked, this is the risk for which this procedure has been asked to be done, so I am doing it. And also whoever is reviewing that will also know. Create accountability. யார் பண்ணினா அப்படின்றதும் டாக்குமெண்ட் ஆகிறதுனால it also creates accountability as to who has missed something or who has not done a proper task. All that will also be there. So now I am coming to the documents which are expected to be maintained. Records maintained by PU, that is the practice unit as they call it here in peer review. Mandatory records on the audit documentation which is under SA 230, that is mandatory. Then if you go under that, auditor shall prepare documentation on the basis of identifying characteristics of items listed, who performed and date of completion, all this should get documented there. Reviewer, date and extent of review. Reviewer full எல்லாத்தையும் திருப்பி பார்க்கணும்னு சொல்லவே இல்லை. Reviewer 2 sample எடுத்து பார்த்தேன், அவன் பண்ணினது கரெக்டாக பண்ணியிருக்கானான்னு போகிறோம். That needs to be done when he has reviewed. So it deals with this, what happens is we deals with nature, timing and extent of audit procedures, results of audit and audit evidence obtained. So what is the finding, the procedure பண்ணோம், what is the finding from there, அதுக்கு என்ன evidence we took, including some confirmations etc. And then significant matters arising from that, what are the key issues which we have identified and how it was concluded. So this needs to be documented as part of 230. This is the main documentation requirement specifically for the engagement. Then other recommendatory records are PO to own profile, list of clients, staff files, then some policies at firm level. Policies could be, like I said, you could have a written policy which says that we will not, if a person is in this level and above, his relatives will not be allowed to go for that audit, right? So you can have various policies like that put in there. Rotation also, the same leader will not do the same audit for more than so many years. You may want to do it, depends on your ability to be able to manage all that also. Adhiyum paathukanum, because ultimately if I am a proprietor practicing, my client, even if it is 20 years, I have to only sign, so I can only review it, right? But I can bring in some levels of changes which can be done. For example, team leader maybe rotate பண்ணலாம் if I have more than one, right? Between them I can rotate, so that there is a fresh view and there is no risk of familiarity. One of the threat is familiarity, so that risk is also addressed. In fact, that is the reason for large companies they brought in this rotation requirement and all that, saying that you have to, for large companies it's important that we break that familiarity by doing it, but I don't know whether that's going to make a big difference. So like I said earlier, the form and content of documentation is completely left to the individual firms. There is no prescribed formats which are there. இப்படிதான் இருக்கணும், இப்படிதான் audit documentation இருக்கணும்னு சொல்லவே இல்லை. They have said you should be able to document and make it available. It will depend on the size of the firm, number of offices, how much authority levels are there. ஒரே partner, everybody reporting, all staff reporting to that same partner will have a different thing than, let's say there is a 3-layer partner, there are managers and then staff. So it can vary. And then the complexity of the firm's practice and organization structure, the record maintained by the client, all this could have an impact on how you keep the documentation. So that's okay, you can manage it like that, any manner you find is convenient. So again, to recap on the documentation process, first start with understanding the entity. If you don't understand what the auditee is doing, you can't plan for the audit. So first is that, and then based on that you also make a time and cost budget, because you are going to spend time and efforts, you have certain fees only, you have to manage within that also. Then audit program, okay, I understand the business, so based on that how I will do an audit program, when I will do what, risk assessment, right? What are the risks there? Then team discussion, like I said, then how do I communicate to my team? What is to be done by them? What are they supposed to look at? What are the specific concerns or areas of importance or focus in that client? So that also can come there. Working papers pertaining to every significant area. So this is the documentation. So once the team is given clear instructions, next is to ensure there are working papers for each significant area. There is a working paper. Now, is there a need to audit every area? No. You can decide these are the risks and these are the significant areas which I am going to, others I am not going to audit. You don't have to audit, but based on a risk based approach. Then arising from that, what is the conclusion you are coming to? And then once you have that conclusion, how you are communicating to those charged with governance. See, there is a minimum requirement, there should be at least a management letter. Even if it is a non-corporate entity, the recommendation is that there should be a management letter where you communicate saying that these are the other issues, etc., which you have noticed, which you are bringing to their attention, right? And what you have considered as the key risk areas which you have audited, based on which you are giving the report. Of course, சின்ன proprietary firm management letter ஒன்று கொடுத்தா உனக்கு தெரியுமான்னு கூட தெரியாது. Again, the simplest thing is you are going to give him 20 pages to sign, you give one more page along with that, it becomes a booklet, right? And you also get a management representation letter, which also you are supposed to get even from a proprietorship. You are supposed to get it, because ultimately what the standard says is the primary responsibility is of the auditee for the whole accounts. So accounts கையெழுத்து வாங்கறச்சு இதையும் கையெழுத்து வாங்கிக்க வேண்டியதுதான். There is no way, we have to get it done, right? Completion and management partner review. Finally, how you are concluding, okay, in the documentation la irukano ella vandirthu, MRL vandirthu, that is the management representation copy vandirthu, board report irukana adu vandirthu, நான் இப்போ கையெழுத்து போடலாம் அப்படின்றதுக்கு ஒரு செக்லிஸ்ட், அதுக்கும் ஒரு செக்லிஸ்ட், கம்ப்ளீஷன் செக்லிஸ்ட். ஸோ யூ நோ தட் யூ ஹவ் நாட் மிஸ் சம்திங். For example, management representation is something we will miss out. See, it's a funny thing. Management representation doesn't protect you if there is something wrong. But not having a management representation by itself will become a failure also. Right? It's only that he is made to understand, or theoretically, he is being made to understand that primary responsibility is his. Theoretically. நாங்கள் ஃபைட் பண்ணோம், நாங்கள் we said we won't sign, we got it done with. See, it is difficult actually. Banks and banks especially, it is a very big difficulty. We somewhere we will have to put our foot down, or என்ன பண்ணோம், இன்னொரு கேஸில் என்ன பண்ணோம், we sent out the MRL. We emailed the MRL and kept that as this thing, record, saying that this is the management representation, and earlier mail pottom, if you don't have any thing contrary to what is given in the this thing, we will take it as confirmed. It's to protect ourselves early. You know, in India what will happen, see, I am being very pragmatic. Your peer reviewer is also going to be from the same this thing, right, background. So he also understands. So at least we have taken a step to say that we have communicated. Big challenge only. Many things they don't give it back. So even in MRL sometimes we do this. Management representation for companies also we do this. Not only for this thing. We do that because they don't react. And we have, ultimately we have the time pressure on us. So sometimes this is another way of getting it done. So we send. So best is to then put a mail like this from your end and be done with it. So I mean, ultimately when peer review, see, there are two things, sir. Let's look at it. One is what is required from all this which will improve your quality. To some extent, documenting and having standard checklists will significantly improve the quality of what we do, because we are a team which is working, and the team has many components which keep changing, right, very often, and we are under pressure. So without a checklist we may also forget. பேங்க் கன்ஃபர்மேஷனே வந்திருக்காது, நம்ம அந்த செக்லிஸ்ட்டில் போடாதனால அன்றைக்கி ப்ரெஷரில் மறந்துடுவோம். அன்றைக்கி விட்டோன்னா அப்புறம் வரவே வராது, அவ்வளோதான். Then later we are only responsible for that. So there are certain things which will improve the quality surely. There are some things which will be an added thing to ensure that in a peer review you are reasonably protected from this thing. See, the other side is peer review is only a peer review. That's why it's called peer review. They cannot take any action or anything based on peer review report, right? It is to help as friends to ensure that we collectively improve our this thing. Why peer review is important today? Because today's peer review is going to be tomorrow's FRRB, QRB and NFRA, right? And I'm telling you, when it comes to FRRB, QRB or NFRA, the reviews are completely different, and they can take suo motu action based on that. So it is very, very important for us to ensure that we do certain things rightly. So this is a way of collectively learning to move up. That is the whole idea behind this to do. In many countries there is no concept of peer review now. They are directly reviewed. So which means everybody is torn if they are into this thing. So assembly of files, this is what I was talking about. 60 days 60 daysல கூட என்ன சொல்றேன், நீங்க ஆடிட் கையெழுத்து போட்ட அப்புறம் புதுசா எதுவும் ஒர்க் பண்ணக்கூடாது. You cannot work on anything. 60 days is given for you to compile what was already done. You can compile, etc. That is why 60 days time is given, and they are now talking about reducing that time also. That's another thing. So but new work cannot be done, no new evidence. So you can't say I have got a mail after this signing of this thing giving me all the confirmations which were required. That will be not considered as audit evidence, because you have already opined. Then whatever you need on a regular basis, you can keep it in a separate permanent audit file. So every time you don't have to be copying. And in today's world everything is electronic, it is much more easier. You create a permanent audit file folder where you can keep all this memorandum, articles, very, very important contracts, all that you can put there. And then even your notes, some specific business process will be unique for them, so you may have some notes, you can put all that there in one place. So this is the contents for the two types of files, the permanent file and the this thing. So the permanent file, basically you can have the letter of engagement. Why we are talking about this in the permanent file today? There is a longer period engagements which are given, so you can put it there, and the correspondence with the previous auditor also can go there, and all constitution related documents, because you might have to refer to it for various purposes at different points of time, and you don't need copies time and again. Then some history about the company, their organization structure, key people, so business, some ownership profiles. You could have their key suppliers, key contracts, all that can come as part of this thing. Last few years balance sheets, all that can be readily kept in one place. For large audits, you might want to have notes on their systems, IT systems, and what processes they have. Then major contracts, minutes, important minutes from the past. So sometimes some minute which was passed 5 years back or 10 years back will have implication. Borrowing limit would have been decided 10 years back. Adu innum continue aayirukku. So on the minutes, every time you may not be going back 10 years to see it. So you can keep all that in one place readily. There could be key agreements which are very important to refer to. and any other requirements like that. So professional advisors, other internal auditors could be there. There could be company secretaries who work with them, RTA. All that can also be kept. Current audit file, whatever you are doing from the audit planning stage, you keep it. Again, it can be in physical or electronic form, right? So in the current audit only, you will also put internal financial control evaluation if you have to do that also. That will also come there. So acceptance of annual reappointment, if any. இது வந்து கம்பெனிஸில் இப்போல்லாம் வராது 5 years இது, பட் in non-corporate there could be periodic appointments which are happening. Periodic fee fixation could also happen, though appointment might be longer. Accounts for the current year, and then reports and final papers, all the work papers, everything. Any schedules, trial balance, any cross referencing for records, all that will come in the current audit file. And most importantly, the audit plan and the procedures which you are going to execute, that should also come into the current year audit file, and then the balance sheet with all the schedules, everything. Audit programs, the individual procedures which are carried out under the audit plan, how that is done, that will also be part of the current year audit file, and extracts from minutes relating to the current year. So that will also be required. So you put that there. So there could be board minutes, etc., where it's a company. Then any other statistical information which is required for the audit. So all that you put it there, right? And you have to retain. So now retain for 8 years. Generally 8 years, and we try and keep it for a little longer than that because of the correct timeline you can't keep. So better to keep it for a longer, and income tax could ask for even a longer period. So generally more than 8 years you try and keep the records. And today what is happening is there are physical records, there are also electronic records. So how do we ensure that our electronic records are also preserved for 8 years? That is also important. File அப்படியே எடுத்து எங்கேயா வச்சுருவோம், ஓகே அது இருக்கும், இன்றைக்கா ஒரு நாள் நம்ம cleaning பண்ணால் தான் அது போகும், அது வரைக்கும் இருக்கும், right? But in data, how do you ensure that all the data which so many team works is taken, kept? So that is where what I suggested works well. So end of the audit, the simplest thing is end of the audit, it is put under a client name, year wise, client wise. So you know it's all available in one place and nobody else can access it also. So confidentiality, retention, everything is addressed by this mechanism. This I will skip again, it's a theory. So the large this thing about the documentation is it should give these basic things, should have clarity and understanding what that document talks about and what it contains, completeness and accuracy for that area, pertinence should be relevant. So like I said, we don't have to create even work papers for areas which we are not going to be auditing or procedures which we need not carry out. We can stick to what we plan and just do that alone, it's enough. Then it should be logically arranged so somebody can review and verify. So normally physical papers la enna naanga sollona two-way cross referencing. So ஒரு simple example எடுத்துட்டா இப்போ மேல we will have the financials, revenue இருக்கு, note number 16 is breakup for revenue. So you go to note number 16. Note number 16 la you will have sale of services or sale of goods, some service income ரெண்டு இருக்குன்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க. When the sale of goods kana work paper, we will give a reference there, WP 7.3. அப்படியே section 7.3 போனா அதோட ஒர்க் பேப்பர் இருக்கும். ஃபிசிக்கலில் சொல்கிறேன் நான் எக்ஸாம்பிளுக்கு. 7.3 லேருந்து அந்த சேல்ஸோட டோட்டலுக்கு ஒரு பிரேக்கப் இருக்குன்னா 7.4. ஸோ யூ நோ இட் இஸ் கோயிங் தேர். 7.4ல டோட்டல் வந்து we will say cross refer to 7.3. ஸோ இது எங்கே கீழேருந்து மேலே எப்படி வருது, மேலேருந்து கீழே எப்படி வருது, ரெண்டும் இருக்கும். ஸோ திஸ் இஸ் two-way cross referencing. ஸோ it can be always traced, all the papers can be traced, and then who has done everything will also be available there. இது ஃபிசிக்கலில். எலக்ட்ரானிக்காக போட்டால் இதே வந்து you can give it a file name and a link, or you can give a file number and put it, whichever works easily. Today everybody can put links, everything can be cross linked. So இங்கே கிளிக் பண்ணாலே அதுக்கு போய்டும். So that is something which is possible. Logical arrangement is very important because voluminous. Say even a small audit, there will be a lot of paper. So how do you ensure that somebody can see it? Legibility and neatness, safety, which is what we were talking about, how do you preserve it, initials and date. So everything which is done should be dated and who has done should be recorded. That's also very important. And finally, summary of conclusions. So this is the full checklist which I will anyway share this whole this thing. What can be in a standard file? அப்படினு ஒரு checklist இருக்கு which can be used for reference. So you can have consent letter, appointment letter, then communication with previous auditor if it is required, compliance requirements for charging minimum fees, then client acceptance checklist. So it's an internal evaluation checklist for ensuring that you are okay in accepting this client. Then ADT1, if it is a company, ADT1 file, engagement letter which you are issuing, maintenance and update of permanent file. So enla add pandrom, every current year file we will keep this thing. So in this year we added these things to the permanent file or we deleted. Can be a record you can keep or not keep, but it's a good practice. In the old days when everything was physical, this used to be there. ஏன்னா என்ன பண்ணுவோம், sometimes some contract would have become irrelevant, so we will delete it from the permanent file. இப்போ ஒரு ராயல்ட்டி அக்ரிமெண்ட் இருந்தது, அந்த ராயல்ட்டி அக்ரிமெண்ட் முடிஞ்ச 2 வருஷம் ஆயிடுச்சுன்னா இன்னும் அதை நான் வச்சுட்டு இருக்கணுமா அப்படின்றது ஒரு கொஸ்டின் வரலாம். சம்டைம்ஸ் யூ வில் ரீடைன் இட் பிகாஸ் we need it for 8 years எவனா காட்டலாம்னா அதில் வரலான்ட்டு. Sometimes we might decide that this is not important for my account, so I am going to take it out. So generally they used to keep a note of that, what is removed or what is added. Today in electronic world nothing is removed, only add, because storage, who is thinking of storage space, keep adding. But if you want, you can maintain this thing there, updates what is done. Then the audit plan and the audit program, independence documents, very important. Again, best is to have a standard format for that and put it, so everybody has given an independence thing. Communication for third party balance confirmation. So we are supposed to control the communication for third party confirmations. So on the confirmation process kind of documentation we should keep. And if there are compliance requirements for listing agreements, that is to be separate. Then indexing of all work papers, cross referencing, very important, right? So you have a number and you have it in indexed manner, so it can be searched. Even physical soft copy files you should index and put, otherwise nobody can trace it. So there has to be a way of tracing it and cross referencing. Then source of checking mentioned in all work papers. Audit queries, memos and their replies and conclusions are also there. Actual valuation report, every time we need to also take a copy of that. Key audit matters which are reported. Internal audit reports, because we also ensure that we are looking at that to see if there are problems which we need to consider from that. Pending legal matters, so without documentation வாங்கிருப்போம் from the client or from their lawyers etc. Complex cases இருந்தா we get some lawyers opinion also. Then contingent liabilities, there could be claims, disputes, all that. Tax calculation, current tax and deferred tax calculation, that will also be part of the documentation here. Then if there is other comprehensive income, their calculation. Depreciation calculation, which is also at some level we may keep it, even if the company is fully computerized, they are calculating the depreciation at some broad level, at least some computation we will keep, so that we know that we have satisfied ourselves on the correctness of the computation. any government grants related documentation. Then section 164(2), which is directors giving a confirmation that they are not disqualified, because it is based on that only we are giving a reporting point. Only in India we have such a big book for audit report. Nowhere you will find this. Nowhere in the world you will find such a big audit report. And frankly, if you ask me, 90% of that is not being put to any productive use. Even the financial statements, we have made it so bulky, not only in India, that financial statements globally, we have made it so bulky that it actually does not interest any investor. I don't think any investor reads it, right? So that is the benefit of that. It's become crazy. Analytical review is another important thing. One of the minimum thing we do is we do a analysis of current year versus last year or over 3-4 years, whatever is it. So what is most relevant, that is something which we should do, and from that we can pick where the risks could be. So that analytical review also something we should keep in our files. And then any IEPF related transfers, etc., those are specific requirements which can come. Cash balance certificate, because some of these things we need to have the original documentation also with us. Demat certificate of investments when we have investments. NAV statements of investments, again when the company has investments we should get all this, and these should come as direct confirmations to us. Statement should come directly from the person handling their brokers or their agents. AOC 4 compliance, if it is a company, management representation letter. So like I said, worst case, small entities, you prepare a few page standard MRL along with the set given for the Modalali's signature, put one more set of paper for his signature, that's all. So nothing else will work, but at least we will have it in our file, because that's important we have. Similarly, even for internal financial control, இது வந்து இப்போ நிறைய companies exempt பண்ணதுனால smaller companies may not get affected, but if it is there, they are to again do the first level and then only we are to do. So what we do is we give a set which we get them sign and give it back. So we have documentation that they have confirmed that it is done. For small companies, what else should you do? They won't even understand, but you still need it, because they have formed it as a company and they are not exempted for some reason. Karok na sonna mari, Karok வந்து every class we need to have a checklist and answers for that, based on which we come to the conclusion. So that is also something we need to keep. And then tax audit, similar set of documentation for tax audit. Largely in many of these cases we may probably be doing both together, the audit and tax audit, and in fact tax audit drives most of these audit requirements. So it's better to keep that also in the file along with all the requirements for that. Then when you come to the office system procedures and training, which we were talking about, one is register. If there are more people, you keep a register of articles and their files, etc. Then diary sheets of what work they did, which is also mandatorily required. Stipend payment system, record of leave taken. Then when it comes to the time spent on each engagement, on each audit, how much time was spent by the partner or proprietor, by qualified assistants or managers, and then semi-qualified articles, what time was spent also we need to keep this thing, because one of the requirements is, have you spent enough time in doing that audit for the size and scale of that audit. That's why we saw a time budget is at the starting there. It's required on two sides. One is whether enough time has been spent to give the quality. The other side is our own this thing. For the fee, have we budgeted and properly done, so that we are not putting too much time and efforts there. So both ways it helps. to have that. Most important is training program. Again, an area where many PUs don't have records and peer reviewers keep pointing out is training program. For the partner problem illa, anyway CP institute la inde download panni kuduthiralam, adu irukku alla avladha, right? Either we have complied, not complied, whatever it is, the status at least is known. But for others, there is no tracking mechanism also. So we must have some record. The simplest thing is, like I said, you could have internal mails which are going, or some register which is maintained for who is attending what. And the most important thing to see there is that you are updating yourself on changes which are happening, especially to do with audits. Declaration of independence from partners and each staff, including qualified CA. Like I said, independence is at two levels. One is at engagement level, one is at firm level on a periodic basis or something. So you know that they are again reconfirming, yes, I will maintain independence, I will maintain you can put that confidentiality also into the same thing, that they are reassuring every year that they are doing it. Traveling expenses incurred, etc., that's more to do with enabling billing, right? Number of audits undertaken by the PU as per guidelines, that is again for reporting. Peer review, when they come, first thing they will want is a huge checklist of what all different types of audit you do, what size, etc. அதுக்கு data compile பண்றதே ஒரு வேலை ஆயிடும், because normally we don't keep that kind of data, so we can do that also. And then the control policies and procedures, again some standard stuff is available from the net, so you can take that, download, modify for your this thing and use that. I understand that the SMP policies for what has been published by, I think, Malaysia or something, Singapore or Malaysia, is small and it's readily available in a good form. Make some small changes to that, it is readily available for you as a firm's policy. Of course, you might have to make some small changes because you might be a proprietorship or a partnership, again adliye konjam changes varalam because of that. Then how you are structured could slightly vary, so you might want to have your own this thing, but at least some standard thing is readily available. SQC compliance, you can have engagement documentation. These are the things which should be there. Audit planning and risk assessment, audit sampling, how you selected the sample and you did testing, what is the materiality used. Materiality Excel has been given by the institute which can be used, right? So many of these things, there are ready things. Of course, the last few years there have been lot of activity by the institute also to try and see some new things can be done on all this to enable audit evidences which have been collected, like for example which samples were audited, or some confirmation copies, or some statements of physical verification, all that will be there. Then quality control, ethical requirement and independence, which will come only from mostly the checklists or declarations. So this is the mantra by which we generally work. This is not from the standards. The first one is file should speak. இப்போ எங்கள் ஆஃபீஸில் வந்து ரிவ்யூ ஃபைல் கேட்டால் ஃபைலை கொடுத்துட்டு அவங்கள ரூமில் விட்டுட்டு நம்ம வந்துடணும். They will review without you. You cannot answer. You are not supposed to answer. The file should answer. If the file is not answering the questions he has in his mind, there is a gap. They will make a list of such findings, come back and then give you gyan or lecture to how to change. So file should speak. You are deaf and dumb. That's the next rule. You are deaf and dumb. You just sit there. If you are sitting there also, you sit there. You are not supposed to speak, because see, look at it. Many a times these questions are asked by the time your manager might have left you. அப்பதான் இந்த கேள்வியே வரும். அப்போ who is going to answer? So it is the file which should speak. So the second principle we use is you are deaf and dumb. right? If you open your mouth to explain a file, the file has failed. If you open your mouth to explain the file has failed. That's the third principle. Fourth principle is, even during work, we say this drop dead theory. Then and there, not tomorrow. So today, if I have completed some task, by end of the day, I have finished my documentation for the work in this thing, because tomorrow, if I don't wake up, the work will go on, my task is done. Drop that theory. Work papers are more important than work, right? In a lighter vein, don't take it very seriously. But that is what is the crux. Everybody is looking at that. I'll give you again, all of you know, corporate governance la, this company got award, and the next year that company went bust on corporate governance, right? Global award was given. Ama, right? So, as in documentation, my ISO 9000, you will find many companies, when the ISO 9000 inspection is to happen, over 1 week of painting, this, that, everything will be going on before that. So, it is up to us to use it as a tool to improve the quality, or just paint a picture every year, right? So, the crux of it is how we want to use the work papers. We can use it to improve our quality, or create documentation and be done. So, we can use it also, but yeah, most important is, if we simply say that if it is not documented, it is not done. You might have done, but it is not done. If it is not documented, it is not done. Audit is not to find things are correct, right, but to locate exceptions, errors, patterns, etc. So, normally approach itself will be, especially this is in statutory audit, we don't want to find problems, because we want to finish it in time. We have so much pressure. 30th September, we have to finish everything. So, we don't want problems to come, but the whole thing is actually the audit is to find errors, find exceptions. So, skepticism, like I said, there is now a project going on where they want to see what is beyond skepticism they should look at. Then last which we have is cockroach theory. If you find one, cockroach never you will find in one. If you find a cockroach, there are many cockroaches. So, you find some problem, some error, you are likely to find more. So, be aware. So, just don't close saying, okay, one found, corrected, closed. You find one, you might find more. So, you have to be careful about it. So, these are some mantras we use in audit this thing. So, this I will again just to give the fundamentals in a different this thing, right. Anything which is, if a work paper is orphaned, anything which is not connected with all this what, when, who, where, how, everything should be available. That is why I said everything gets cross referred, then it is fine, otherwise it is just not. Now, I come to nearly the end. We can have some question answers surely after that, I am open, but this is what I was talking about, where ready materials are available for guidance as well as for some checklists, etc. So, what are all available? There is that guidance note on financial statements for non-corporate entities. They have also published an Excel version of how the financial statement generally should look for non-corporate entities. Similarly, for LLPs, right. Ind AS disclosure checklist, there is a huge book. Okay, Ind AS, not every company is under Ind AS. AS also there is a disclosure checklist which the institute has published, available in soft copy, hard copy, everything, right. So, we can just refer to that. So, the standard practice we have for small companies is, we will have AS1 to this thing listed in our single sheet. We will say AS1 applicable, yes or no. So, first level is to say which is applicable, which is not applicable, because many will not be applicable. for example, AS7 construction contract will not be applicable to many companies. So, we do this first level, and if it is a simple company, we stop with this one sheet and we keep one remarks column where we write any specific remarks we need to put. If it is a little more complicated company, for those specific AS which we have identified as applicable, we check with this checklist and see that all compliances are there, because otherwise the checklist is huge. I don't remember this Ind AS checklist size, but some of the Ind AS checklists are nearly 1000 pages. Now, if I have to fill up 1000 pages, I am dead. So, you have to limit, that is why I said the nature of documentation will depend on the size of the firm, size of the entity which is being audited, the complexity, all that. So, you can have different things. In fact, I will also come to that after I finish this list. I will come to specific some suggestions. Then accounting standards quick referencer for micro non-company entities. Quick referencer. So, it is small. I don't have to use the AS checklist every time. For bigger companies, I will use it. For smaller companies, I will only use this. But in my documentation, I will have something which shows that I have applied my mind, right? Technical guide on accounting for NPOs when you are doing non-profit organizations, that can be a thing. There are also newer things now, handbook on audit of CSR, handbook on audit of entities which are handling CSR, third party CSR funds, all that has also come. Then guidance note on CARO, guidance note on audit of ICFR, practitioner's guide for audit of small entities. This is the most relevant thing, because many checklists for small entities are readily available here and many formats are readily available here. It may not be in Word format which you can edit and use, but as a reference surely it is available. Word format, Word or Excel format also, I will come to that. So, practitioner's guide for audit of small entities. In fact, before we got into using software for audit, currently we are doing all our audits on a software. Earlier, for many years, I used to use this only, practitioner's guide for, at that time it was called something slightly different, practitioner's guide for tiny and audits or something like that, it was there, right? But that had the minimum documentation, so you are protected. Implementation guide on audit of internal financial controls, that is for again where IFC is applicable. Then ICA's implementation guide on audit trail, which is now additionally required. Then schedule 3 liye 3 guidance notes vandirukku. So, one for division 1, division 2, division 3, depending on what you need, you can, these things you can keep as reference material. Then findings of FRRB, QRB, because they have pointed out so many things and we are continuing to make the same mistake, it is not good. We can do some new mistakes, we can avoid that. So, in this, let me see if there is something more. Yeah. So, in this, like I said, the key thing which can readily give a lot of documentation is the practitioner's guide for audit of small entities. Then there are also people like I think Sri Priya's put out a set of documents which are editable. If I remember right, Jomon has also put out a set of documents which are all editable. So, it has all the basic formats which we need for audit readily available. There are many others who have put out sets of such documents which are readily available. And for example, the firm's policies and all that, like I said, which will cover all the SQC requirements. It is readily available from Singapore. This thing is as a sample which is available. We can take that and modify to our requirement. So, there are so much of information which is currently readily available. We need to only ensure that we are taking one and consistently following it. Then we would have our minimum documentation always met completely. So, with that, I have actually run through my presentation a little quickly also, because I thought any questions you have practically we can talk, right. Maybe practically as well as pragmatically, like I have been frank in saying some of these things, we can discuss anything on this.
There may be, for instance, the 20 clients we applied this 80-20, there will be 5-6 clients may be contributing more with respect to fees and the top line, bottom line of that. So the remaining may be non-key or 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs kind of. That is the case, whether we have to maintain this working papers at 5 for all the 20, or is it enough that where really we can have to do the work. So remaining, as you say, that 1 page, 2 page, applicability of accounting measures.
So that is where what you can do is very pragmatic thing. Again, I am going back to the time when we were doing mostly on a physical basis. So we used to have 3 levels of differentiation. One was where we were using the practitioner's guide. At that time it was called, if I am right, it was called practitioner's guide for tiny audits or something like that. Institute withdrew that, and then this has come. That was only about 20 pages in all, the booklet itself, and the booklet itself was in a checklist format, 20 or 25 pages, that's it. So that was what we were using for the smallest audits. Then for some mid-size audits, we used to have these additional checklists. We will have Caro checklist, we will have a accounting standard checklist, maybe a 1-pager checklist. Like that we will have one set of this thing, and where required we will add some additional checklist. For example, if they had a complex revenue process, we will only add that AS9 checklist there, we will not put other things there. Then third level is the large companies, where we will used to have even a company law checklist. Our company law checklist used to be by itself again some few hundred pages. But that's madness to keep filling for everybody. That's only for the listed companies, etc. So we used to have 3 layers. Currently also we maintain multiple layers, though we are putting it into the software. Currently also the checklist we are limiting to the different types of this thing. Though the base, the audit plan, the procedures, everything is a common thing. But all these additional checklists we limit it to that. Even Caro, we used to have 2 types of checklists. One checklist would be nearly 1 page for every clause. So it will be about 20 odd pages. The other checklist will be a single page, 1-liner. So small companies we used to use that. So it depends on, so that is where it is important that you put a plan for your entity appropriately. So I can say that all these top 5-6 companies I will do like this, other 15-20 companies I will do like this. So absolutely not wrong. But some documentation, some level of documentation must be maintained for every audit, including a charitable entity audit, which you might be doing even for free. Because you are giving audit report, it has to be done, no doubt about it. Sorry? Criteria you can establish your own based on, that is why I said there is no prescribed format for documentation. It is left to the firms to evolve their own method based on the size and nature of the audits and the size and nature of the firm also. And that there is a criteria actually given. Yeah, no, but they have a minimum criteria which has been given. Like for example, if there is a bank audit, you have to select one bank audit. So there is a detailed criteria given there. The rest of it can be on a sampling basis. But there is a very detailed criteria given for selecting the files which you must review. Correct. Sir, basically what they are saying is, if you have listed company, you have to select so many. If you have a bank branch audit or a bank audit, you have to select something in that. So whatever branch audit irundha kuda select aayidum adu. Yes. If you have 4 partners, everybody's one audit file should at least be covered. Then they have so many criteria, so you will end up having multiple files being picked always. So you can't say that they will verify only one file which I will show and all. Going to happen. It is going to be much more, and they will have to select it. So that's why I said one of the things you have to give for peer review itself is first a huge list of all your audits with certain specific data. Based on that, then the selection will be done.
So because of tender, the minimum billing, even what is in the cost account and the cost accountants, the minimum billing is given by the client himself. And in case that there are some firms which they bid for less than the minimum value and they get the audit, and if that firm is reviewed, and what will be the consequence of that? How it will be treated in the peer review? And the peer review will be qualifying the report, or what will be the after the consequences by the?
Like I said, in any peer review finding, there can be no action taken. All peer review findings are only friendly inputs. No action can be taken on a peer review. That will come back, but no action can be taken. The institute cannot, the peer review board cannot give it to the disciplinary committee or anybody to take any action. Huh? Queries are asked, yes. Queries are asked, but no action can be taken. The queries are asked more to, put it into the perspective finally. Sir, to give you an example, QRB reviews, they can take action also. QRB reviews take 1 year plus after the review is done for them to finalize. That's a different process.
Even the minimum billing also shows some like that even for as per the CA minimum billing, even for applying PAN, we have to have 7,500 even for PAN.
Sir, minimum billing in my view is only recommendatory, right? So there is no mandatory this thing. They cannot say that you have violated some act by that. So that is the legal position today.
Peer review, there is the questionnaire, there is a class that minimum.
There is a clause, but nobody can. It's not law, right? Even the institutes, it's only recommendatory. They are only trying to find. See, they are trying to say, okay, can we together by talking improve it? Is what is the current thinking. Maybe future it changes. Let's see at that time, because currently it is not law. Currently it's not mandatory. The institute cannot even make it mandatory, frankly. I mean, that's the position. So it's no. AQMM I don't think has been made mandatory for all as of now.
For listed companies it is.
Yeah. Avarum sir, pinnadi varum alla irukku. Bigger problems are there in AQMM to they have revised it also now, the new version. Yes sir.
Peer review for the period 21 to 23, 21, 22, 23. So the firm has took a joint decision not to insist on collecting the fees because during COVID. Now the peer reviewer is saying then you are not independent. The 2 years fees are pending in 23. Then we showed them 24 we have collected one fee and we are slowly collecting it because we want to give them some time. Now what is your view on that?
My view is the ethical standard when it talks about the previous year fee not being collected, it does not say that you should not do the audit. It only says you have to evaluate whether you are having a threat of independence, right? Whether you have the threat of independence, you have to only decide. So one could, in all fairness, one could take a view there that you are not in the wrong just because you have not collected and you have done the audit. That is why it is very good to have a client acceptance checklist kind of a thing where you are applying your mind and you have put that in writing at that point of time. Today peer reviewer is asking you, you are giving an answer. If today peer reviewer says, see, in 2021 this is what I have written, makes a difference, right? In 2021 I had evaluated this and I had decided that because of COVID we will do these things. Everybody is doing for various things, we should also do it, and this is not going to affect me because we are financially strong enough to take it, right. So that documentation in 21 versus answer in 25 could make a significant difference of how it is received. But if you strictly ask me, as per the regulations or the code of ethics, it is not a mandatory ban. It is again only something which they have said that this is also an aspect where you will have to evaluate whether it would affect your independence. So as long as you have evaluated and you have come to a judgment, I don't think they can question your judgment on that. Even assuming later you have lost that fee, for some reason you could not recover also, they can't question your judgment. Judgments, in fact, peer review cannot question the judgment as long as you have taken a judgment, even in audit. I might come to a different conclusion, but that need not be your conclusion, frankly.
Normally, how many years it costs to a peer reviewer examine, decide
Peer reviewer only looks at the data based on last 3 years. Or sonna mari ipo varavanga vandu will look at up to 24.
because we had three floods or at least two floods, right?
So in fact, one of the things itself is that let me rephrase this. Let's suppose you were a company and you had lost the records in flood. Government expects you to retain it for 8 years, right? So how you will deal with it? Same way you have to deal with it. If you ask me, there are multiple layers. Somebody could say, okay, you should have had mechanism to ensure that there is a backup. But for how much and what backup I will keep? Physical files, how will I keep a backup somewhere else, right? So there are layers to layers on that. So long as you are able to address it, I think it's fine.
So some we actually took the physical file, scanned it, and then we did some.
So in today's digital world, yes, it is possible, much better possibility of retaining records than in the physical times. கோர்ட்லேயே வந்து இம்பார்ட்டன்ட் டாக்குமெண்ட்ஸே எல்லாம் ஃப்ளட்டில் போயிட்டுதுன்னு சொல்லிட்டு ஹாப்பியாக இருக்காங்க. ஸோ ஐ திங்க் வி ஷுட் டேக் இட் வித் த ரைட் திஸ் திங் அப்ரோச். We had a problem also actually. We had of course long back our whole Bombay building went down in fire, the whole building. So whatever records were there physically, and this was 20 years back. So 20 years back everything was physical except some data which we were having in electronic form. So everything was physical. Audit was being done physically. So all papers before that was gone. So we only have a FIR copy. That's it. So for many years anything related to that was gone. That's it. Can't do anything.
Documentation with respect to small certification.
So certification does not come under these standards. Certification in India, we have this nice this thing, guidance note on special audit reports and certificates. There is a guidance note, right? So it goes under that. So the minimum requirements there will again be some engagement letter should be there, so that scope, everything is properly there, and also the responsibilities of two parties are clearly understood. There is some minimum requirements they have said you should include in the certificate, and if the certificate is to be, and then you have to have a work paper to show how you have verified for the certificate. And there is also a requirement where the certificate is in some government notified format, so you are not able to give the clauses etc. You have to give an addendum which covers the management responsibility, auditor's responsibility, and that you are only doing as per the standards. You are not you can never be 100% correct, all that being brought in. So these are the meaning basic things which will be looked at in that. We need to ensure that that part is there. And a management representation, even for a certificate we should get a management representation. So many a times of course it becomes, in small things it becomes a question of getting sign offs. That's what the client is also expecting from us, no? Sign, because the bank is asking sign here, sign there, sign in 20 pages. So you also tell them, okay, you also sign in another 25 pages and put it. You can make standard. See, if you are regularly doing, you can make standard this thing. So only name this thing, you leave it. The engagement letter is a 1-page letter readily there. So anytime somebody comes, you put their name and etc. Sign that also. Typical. See, if you go to some of these international firms, you will find this, right? Or simple examples are, a small company in Europe. 10 நாளா அவனோட accounts which I can go to the ROC and download, ROC equivalent and download. அதை அனுப்ப மாட்டேன்றான். ஏன்னா அவன் இன்னும் NDA சைன் பண்ணல. அவ்வளவுதான். It's not some, you know, some information which is so critical or something which I cannot lay my hands. ஒண்ணுமே இல்லை, அவனுக்கு வெயிட் பண்ணாம if I paid some 200 GBP I can download that. Only thing is it's 200 GBP, அதனால யோசிக்கணும். Right? You can download that. That's all is there. அது அந்த NDA சைன் பண்றதுக்கு 10 நாளா வெயிட் பண்ணிருக்கான். அந்த NDA back and forth போயிட்டு இருக்கு. Right? Nothing. He is giving only financial statements which is available if you pay readily. Right? So they are so meticulous. It's the attitude. So we should put these 10 things and this thing. Another example I will give you. Yesterday I had a call with a UK firm, UK subsidiary of an Indian entity, and I was facilitating it. During the call, அழகா அவனே கேட்டுறான், I am required to do these things. Have you had any fraud in the last 1 year? நம்ம போய் ஏதாவது ஒரு கிளைண்ட் முதல் நாள் கேட்குறோமா? அதை யோசிக்கிறோம் நம்ம. They don't. They ask. And he immediately said, no, we have not had, not to the knowledge we have, but if there is something known to our managers in UK, we will let you know, or we will put you on touch with them later. You can talk to them. Did you have any non-compliance with law in the last 1 year which you know of? First, because this is the requirement in accepting an audit. We write it as part of our letter, right? And send it. But அவன் எழுதுறதுக்கு கூட வெயிட் பண்ணல. Kurt immediately is asking on the face. We hesitate. I think we should clearly say it's only another additional 5 papers. You have to also sign. You are expecting us to sign. You also sign. Or if he doesn't even understand, you put it along with the rest of the set, get it signed. It has to become a practice. In fact, this way we give certificates, they don't give certificates abroad. They don't give. In India, some historical reasons it has come and it has stayed. So everything and everything, you go get a certificate from your auditor, as though we know anything about it. Some of the subject they ask has no relevance also sometimes, but that's the way it has developed. And frankly, my view, at that time institute also thought it was, you know, doing professional development and built more and more of this. Frankly, statutory work is the wrong thing to depend on. Tax audit. Concurrent audit, I think they gave some clarification later. I think it is not covered. Oh, it's only the all statutory attestations which are covered now. Yeah, they ask for all that information. Yes, because when they do the review, they are reviewing the firm. Your quality policies are across all your work. Quality policies are across. The specific engagement related things, they may not go into so much in those. From a quality perspective, yes. Like for example, independence, are you ensuring it's as applicable to internal audit or a concurrent audit as this thing, no?
So whatever we raise UDN for will be covered.
And now you have to take UDIN for every report, and so it will get covered.
Internal audit is also.
So the only thing is, when they review, they may not go into how you have applied SA 300 or SA 230 to concurrent audit. They may not look at it in more detail, because that is more focused on the statutory attestations. That will be the difference, but broadly on the overall firm level policies or firm level controls which you have to have, like independence, objectivity, confidentiality, all that will be looked at for every engagement. It can be looked at. In fact, they are looking at it at firm level.
So with regard to cite the financial, is it enough if I have a scanned copy of everything, or should I have the original scanned copy?
In today's world, we keep only scanned copies. We where client gives us a signed copy, we keep it, otherwise scanned copy. But there is a very interesting thing which has been raised, and it's a good practice to have. If you don't have, one of the things you can do is to verify with the ROC that what is filed there and what you have are the same. But that is something which has been also noticed, I think. Yeah. Hello. So there have been cases which have been noticed also, where what has been filed with the ROC and what has been kept in the file is also different. இப்போ நான் ஒரு QRB பண்ண கேஸ்லேயே where what is there in the file signed and what has been filed with the ROC is different. Of course, ரொம்ப material difference இல்லை, but still it is different. It's not the same set. Non-corporate, obviously you won't have it at all, no? Then it's a question of what is filed with tax, if at all. So mostly it is being done for tax purpose, or if at all. See, you have to look at it from answering his point. You have to look at it from a risk perspective. If I don't have the signed physical somewhere, how do I tomorrow establish that this is the one I signed? So it is okay in cases where you can refer it by some other means, like where it is getting filed with ROC and things like that. But otherwise, somewhere you should have. For example, in our office, what we have is, in the audit file, we will have only the scanned, because we have everything digital. We will have only the scanned. But we have a separate file where year-wise all signed original accounts are filed and kept. Because we get a copy, no? Mostly clients give us a copy. So we keep that there, which will have the directors and our signature in original. But that will be only kept there. Normally we don't even produce it for reviewers and all that. Reviewers, when we produce the file, it will all be only digital copies. Because it will evolve. Over a period, they will find, see, it's a learning, no? You find some new frauds, so then next, why people are, why UDIN came and why everybody started looking at UDIN, because what you sign and what is given are all different. That started the UDIN. Then next, they have found cases where what is signed and what is filed with ROC is different. Especially if it is XBRL, you are not filing the accounts, no? You are only keying in, right? And somebody is certifying. It need not be you. You are signing the accounts. The filing is being done by somebody else, right? What if that is fraudulently filed? There are no ready answers today. So one of the things normally you look at is, to protect yourself is, okay, what is filed is the same what we have signed, at least on big key items. You can check and keep, or at least next year when you go for audit, you can check and keep. at least for the big ones, that's important. Well, when people do fraud, they do anything and everything. So it's a question of that. Any other questions on? So if we don't have anything, I think we can call it a day and have a great evening. Thank you. At any other point of time also, if you have any questions, normally, I don't know, yeah, maybe in the front will be there. My mail ID will also be there in the presentation itself. So feel free to write to me. Generally, I respond within 24 hours, sometimes maximum 48 hours. I normally would respond to all my mails. I'll be very happy to be in touch. Thank you.